Say hello. I am Mark Delacroix, product lead for Lorelink, and I am back here again with another exciting entry in our indie creator series. This time I am here with Chris Longhurst, the designer of various games, including, basically most recently, he has got a Backerkit available up for Myriad Inverse, which is a Lancer campaign. Previous to that was Gravity, a game about diminishing options. So we'll be talking about all those today, but first I'll let him introduce himself. Chris, go ahead and talk about yourself.
Hi, I feel I've been a bit oversold. I wasn't told I had to be exciting. Um, My name is Chris Longhurst, he, him pronouns. I have been selling role-playing related texts for a bit more than 10 years. Which means I've been around long enough that I'm not a hot new property, but I haven't been successful enough to become an established industry figure. So I'm kind of living in that little limbo in the middle at the moment. I have a cat. He decided to make his presence known once again. This is Cedric. Hello, Cedric.
Hello, cat. Paid the cat tax.
Yeah, he's very handsome. Good job too. I've forgotten where I was. Yeah, I've been selling RPG stuff for about 10 years. I've been playing them since I was about 9, which was a very, very long time ago at this point. Yeah, and sundry other less important details going on.
Okay.
Cedric is trying to quit Twitch. Don't do
that. Cat has opinions of what you should be doing versus what you are doing. Obviously, cats are the center of attention. Cats know what they're. Cats know the exact space to be.
Yep. He's parked his butt on my mouse and accidentally nearly clicked the close window button.
Wow. So Myriad Inverse, the image of the art, which has just popped up on a stream right now, in fact, is your latest, basically your latest basically thing, which has caught your attention, basically made you interesting. Yeah. So what made you basically? What made it basically? What is Myriad Inverse, and what got you interested in creating it?
Myriad Inverse is my attempt at writing a Lancer campaign. I have been sort of vaguely interested in Lancer for a while, and then last year I got a chance to play in like a proper game of it, which sort of redoubled my interest and also showed me like more about how it works in motion, which I hadn't previously been able to experience. And it's combined with... So the very first campaign for Lancer, I believe, that was sold was like No Room for a Wallflower. It's like an official first-party module, which I bought because I wanted to see how one worked, and this is years and years ago. And I found it didn't have any maps in it. And Lancer being a game about moving like robots around on maps, I was kind of expecting some, and I felt quite peeved about that. So a non-trivial amount of Myriad Inverse is me saying, I've got maps in this one. Look. Which, you know, is this a good motivation to make things? I don't know. But I've tried to like wrap some fairly decent other stuff around what is essentially me getting a bit peevish about not getting the product I expected.
So basically,
I should hasten to add that since then, Massive Press have released products with maps in. So they beat me to market by several years.
But you know, basically your anger, got communicated to them, and so. But hey, we get a cool product out of it. So in terms of basically, what does basically Lancer, for those who may or may not be familiar with it, because some people may or may not be, Lancer is a very, very good mech style game. It is I would describe it as kind of halfway between your BattleTech, basically minis on a map, basically full measuring inches, torso rotation level of basically more combat and less RPG, and a full narrative RPG, which doesn't really care about basically having figures or stats or anything like that. Lancer kind of sits in a nice kind of middle position between those. So it gives you the ability to be narrative and tell stories about your characters, your pilots, and what they're doing, but also lets you have cool, fun scenes where big robots smash into things and blow stuff up. Basically, that is the other fun part about that.
I sort of put it on a continuum of like, if you have like crunchy mech games on one end, Lancer's up there, and then on the other end you've got Beam Saber, which I also really like, which is way more narrative. Yeah, Lancer it's very much about the giant robot fights.
So in terms of basically, so what kind of world basically are you presenting in Myriad? What's kind of your, other than it's got maps, which is a good hook. What basically, as you dug deeper into it, what kind of hooked you with basically in Lancer and made you go, oh, I want to tell this story?
What I want to do, well, because, like I say, Lancer's largely about fights, the story in Myriad Inverse is largely an excuse to set up robot fights.
I mean, yes.
Each mission is basically like, well, I want each fight to have something interesting going on. And so I've written a storyline which kind of links all these things together. I've forgotten what the question was. Something about the world.
Yeah, but kind of basically
the world. Yeah,
building out this, building the background, building the sets, essentially, for this giant fight to make things flow from one to another.
So when I run games, I tend to run them in quite an improvisational style. I'll have a very sort of sketched-in background and fill in details as necessary, and that's kind of what I've created for this. It's the world of Far Harvest, which I have deliberately set isolated from the rest of like Union, which is one of the big polities in Lancer lore, and I did that specifically because I don't want any of this lore stuff getting involved. I want to focus very much on what is happening on this world this way. So it's like, it is just you. It's just you, the player characters, and the enemies, and no one's coming to help. No one's going to fish you out of this other than you. But the world itself is basically, its isolation is key because I didn't want to deal with lore dumps, or for that matter, like, I didn't want to write something and then somebody come along later and say, well, this contradicts this point of lore here, and it's like, I don't really want to worry about all that. I basically want to give NPCs ridiculous names, set up interesting fights and interesting sort of characters to interact with between the fights, and that's what you get in. That's why it's kind of also why I'm putting it out as a zine. I say zine, it's probably going to run to like 80 pages because it turns out that when you write Lancer stuff, it sprawls. Or maybe that's just me. I'm not very good at brevity. But so it's gonna be a pretty chunky zine. But like the aesthetic is very much like all the other zines I've done. Like I've done the art for them, and I use like a particular typewriter font to lay them out in, and I'm keeping with all that and keeping the same printer, so it's got that continuity. But yeah, I didn't want to worry too much about like huge big lore dumps or like massive amounts of setting info. I wanted people to be able to pick it up and get to the fights, and if you need more details, throw them in. Because I haven't given you lore you need to worry about contradicting. It's fine.
Yeah, basically, a lot of times, basically there is basically much like there's a continuum of basically of mech games and things like that. There's a continuum of GMs who are like, oh, I want to do all of this cool prep work, and I want to do all of that. But basically, where it comes to, and basically, especially in a game like Lancer, basically the combat can be tricky because of the fact that You don't want your players to walk into a fight because it's the big ultimate conclude. Basically, you've set up this stuff, however you've set it up, whether it's basically a 2-sentence thing describing it, or it's been everything's been leading up to. You want the fight to feel like, oh, this is something, and it's balancing that fight is always the tricky part of basically designing any campaign. And any GM will be like, oh yeah, basically it's always a pain because you're like, oh, what do I do? So basically, I'm going to find it interesting. How do you feel basically setting up these fights in Lancer? You're balancing them for an unknown audience almost, or are you providing guidelines and strictures to be like, hey, your players should be?
I find it easier to balance things for an unknown audience because I can't remember who wrote this. I read it maybe last year, maybe the year before. Time is difficult, but they said that one of the tricks when you're writing adventures for any system is that because you don't know what the party composition is coming into each encounter, sometimes they are just going to hard counter whatever you put on the table and they will walk it. And sometimes the opposite will be true and they will struggle like mad to get through something that was never intended to be a huge obstacle. And I think that's just the price of entry, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm trying to, like, even within Lancer, it is possible to build, like, Lancer's fairly well balanced, but it is possible to build characters of extremely different effectiveness. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like, if you're spec'd for speed, some missions become much easier and some become less easy because you know, if you spec for firepower, some other missions will be easier. So there's all that, and there's also, like, it is acceptable to lose. Like, this isn't D&D where the only price of losing a fight is everyone dies. When you do a mission in Lancer, you can have a situation where you have failed your objective, but, you know, you're still alive. Things move on. Your pilots are still alive. You've still got things to do. So all I have to do is, after every mission, say, what happens if they lose this one? And the answer is usually, well, things are harder later on. Oh dear. But hopefully, because it's a range of sit reps, there's 6 in the Lancer book, and I've, like, made up another one so far. I haven't finished writing it yet. Don't tell anyone. But if you keep things varied, then sometimes you're going to hit the right note, sometimes you won't, and that's, I find it easier to live with when I'm writing for an unknown audience. But for example, I run Beacon, which is like Lancer but fantasy, on a Thursday, and I really struggle with boss fights in that. Like, they're always hugely anticlimactic because I write something down, it looks really murderous on paper, and then the players roll up and they're like, here's my 18 million superpowers, and the fight is over in like a round and a half. And I'm like, didn't do that one very well. But equally, I've written stuff for them which was supposed to be like just a random fight because they antagonize some void creatures, and then it's wiped out a significant chunk of their resources because they just weren't spec'd to deal with it. But equally, like, so long as there are consequences that aren't just everybody dies, it doesn't matter too much if people win or lose any individual fight.
Yeah, that's always the thing that can basically makes it interesting especially when you're dealing with more, I'll say, nuanced systems. Basically, D&D is what it is. It is relatively straightforward. It has one scale of things. It has HP. Your HP hits 0, you're done. Your HP is full, you're fine. Your effectiveness, they have conditions and other stuff, but it's not as nuanced as other things. Like, basically, it's the dealing with what failure means and providing an opportunity and letting failure breathe, as it were, can always be that interesting. Like you're talking about, okay, what if you fail this mission? What does that mean? Does that encourage the players to come back? Does it give the players a mortal enemy that they're now like, oh, we want to go find that guy and kick his butt because he trashed us and basically he caused us X amount of damages or ruined our reputation or basically things like that. Basically, now we're in legal troubles because of this guy, because of whatever happened. And it's interesting dealing with all of that and being like, oh, okay. Now that's the job of the GM, is to come into those situations and be like, oh, okay, how do I deal with success? How do I deal with the, oh gosh, they wiped the floor with my super boss, who was supposed to just laugh menacingly 3 miles away and then walk away, and I forgot they have ranged weapons. And how do you deal with basically the minions kicked him in a way, basically, but that's the same time you have to realize you're telling a story. It needs to be interesting. It needs to, basically, failure and success should both do something. That's always the interesting part to me.
I mean, success comes built in with, like, you get to keep playing. Except, what was I thinking? There was a game that rattled across my head like some time ago where I realized that success is bad because it means you stop playing, but I can't remember which one it was. Never mind, that's a thought for another time. But yeah, generally speaking, the reward of success is you get to keep playing the game, which is presumably something you want. Whereas failure has to, ideally that also means you get to keep playing, but something unpredictable is now on the table that wasn't before.
I mean, basically, like you say, success means you get to keep playing. Basically, and the where the exception is if players are like, we want to solve this murder, or we want to figure out who's betraying the kingdom, or we want to defeat the dragon. Basically, you can just basically they can roll up into session 1. You sit down. Basically, you walk into the dragon's lair. They roll their first die. You don't even look at it. You're like, you kill the dragon, and you pick up your books and leave. The player's gonna be like, well, yes, we succeeded. Yes, we did what we were doing, but this is a boring game. I didn't get anything out of this game. But it basically,
you can do something interesting with that as well. Like, I'm just jumping on this because you've triggered a memory from a very long time ago. Exalted First Edition had a mystic martial arts, which is like Dreamwalker style or something. But it was a high essence thing, which is very powerful, and a lot of its abilities were basically just like, you win. How do you win? And I asked the author of this style, like, I got a lot of complaints online. I asked the author about it, and she said, like, beyond a certain power level in Exalted, it's not even a question of are you going to win anymore, and so the story of how you win, of what you do and what it costs you, becomes way more important. And that stuck with me. I designed a game called Bleak Spirit around about 2019, I want to say. I remember like shipping out after the Kickstarter was interrupted by COVID, so it would have been 2019 or so. And one of the things I did in that was it's a Dark Souls type game. And one of the things I did in that was I didn't want to write a combat system for it because of reasons. Basically, the combat system in Dark Souls works perfectly well when the computer's doing it. But if you tried to replicate that on a table with dice and stuff, it's so slow. It just clunks awfully. I had to think about it, and I thought, well, the thing about Dark Souls is, provided you are patient enough, or provided you engage with the game systems enough, you are going to win. It's not a question of, like, for all that it's got this vaunted difficulty, it's not a question of will you win, it is a question of how do you do it. What method do you use? What does it cost you? Do you lose a bunch of souls? Do you have to burn through a bunch of consumables? Do you just have to lose time where you go and you grind up like 10 levels and come back? So when I wrote Bleak Spirit, like when you come into a fight or some other danger, the question is not like, the question is how do you win and what does it cost you? Because that's not really what the game is interested in, like the minutiae of sword swings and stuff. It's interested in telling a particular style of story.
Yeah, basically, it makes sense. Dark Souls basically is a great example of basically why some people play Dark Souls because they want to spam dodge roll and they want to be able to come into the game and basically beat the entire game blindfolded without taking a hit. And it's very much a skill level thing. But the flip side of it is Dark Souls is also known for having very, very, very intrinsic and deep world building and world storytelling that basically the player can choose to engage with or not. And so if you're making a role-playing game, you have to pick which one of those sides you're going with. And a lot of times we're like, oh no, you want the super combat thing, and you're like you said, well, no, it's a matter of what do you sacrifice, what do you give up to do this? Is it just time? Is it you're going to spend hours to basically you're going to perfect this, basically figure it out because you're functionally immortal in a lot of those games.
Yeah. Like Bleak Spirit, I was playing Dark Souls 3, and Bleak Spirit was designed to capture a particular moment. Like right near the beginning of Dark Souls 3, I think it's when you wander into like the first big area, like the past. You go through the tutorial bit, you get to like the Firelink Shrine, the big shrine area, and then you go out of there into the first bit, and it's this castle, and there's like a dragon over there, and there's these people turning into trees. Like these undead turning into trees, and then you go over to and there's a bunch of zombies fighting. That one of them spits out a dragon-shaped swarm of bees that murders you immediately, and the feeling is, what happened here? What is going on? And that's what I wanted to capture with Bleak Spirit. Not like, you know, the satisfaction of beating a difficult boss, but the unraveling of an absolutely ludicrous like place. Like, this was a place once and it's not what it was. How did it get there? What happened? How did this happen? Sort of deal. So that's what it does.
It's a really interesting thing as a GM, basically kind of gauging the interest level of your players and figuring out, okay, what are you sitting down at the table for? Is it just to push buttons, watch things explode? Okay, that's one style of play, and basically like you're talking about with Lancer in terms of, okay, a lot of this is let's get you to the next push button, things explode things that feels satisfactory.
Yeah, if you're sitting down to play Lancer, it's a fairly safe bet that you want to build a fancy robot using all the crunchy bits, and then put your little toy out onto the map and have it blow up some enemy robots. That's like the central draw of the game. So that's what you assume people are wanting.
Yeah, basically, and it's that comes basically like you talk about when you as a GM, picking that system is a lot of time is going to give you that control, because it's going to control what buttons you put in front of your players, and what buttons you put in front of your players are going to be what buttons they're going to want to press. Which is a lot of time when people are like, oh, I tried to do this thing with D&D and I had this big political intrigue, but my players keep killing the NPCs. Well, that's because of the fact that when you look at a D&D character sheet, you have a list of explode people's faces buttons.
And then,
they want to press them eventually because you put those buttons in front of them and they want to push them. Basically, and so if you don't want to do that, don't put those buttons in front of your players. Which basically, as a designer, that's got to be an interesting way of being like, okay, what buttons do I what type of story am I telling? What buttons do I want to put in front of them to enable them to basically experience the story in a way that reflects what I'm building towards?
I feel like it's one of the big advantages of Powered by the Apocalypse and the way the move systems work in those games is like, you explicitly put things in front of players and you say, this is what you are doing, this is what you can do. Like, the basic, like I wrote one called Pig Smoke, that's I think the first actual game I published, and it's about wizard academics. So it's got mechanics for, it's a comedy game about wizard academics, so it's got mechanics for shouting at people, for lying ineffectively to people, for publishing academic research, for doing academic research, and because I knew people would try, it also has a move for getting into fistfights, but because of the way that move works, you generally don't ever get what you want by getting into a fist fight. You just end up looking like an idiot. And by sort of putting you're right, by putting like specific buttons in front of people, you signal like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And especially with PBTA games, I mean the original Apocalypse World, for example, is if the players aren't pushing those buttons, the GM decides what happens next. And in Apocalypse World, the GM is picking from a list of moves which are all problems. So if the players aren't pushing their buttons, everything gets worse. So the only way they have of succeeding is by using the levers they have and hoping they roll well, I guess. I was going to segue to a different topic, and I forgot what it was. This happens to me sometimes, frequently.
Well, because good.
But yeah, it's like, yeah, by sort of guiding what the GM can do, it means that you. Oh yeah, that's because I wrote a whole essay on this. I'm kind of going backwards through it. By limiting what the GM can do to only making things worse, then the players have to act on the world to achieve their PC sort of objectives, whatever those happen to be. Whereas if the GM's responses aren't constrained in that way, you can also get what you want as a player by manipulating the GM, basically. You know, give the GM a cupcake, the GM gives you what you want, because they're allowed to do that. Whereas in Apocalypse World, you give the GM a cupcake, the GM says, I'm going to announce future badness. Because that's their limited list of things they're allowed to do. This is completely off topic, I just find it interesting.
Well, it has a lot to do with basically how you design things. Like Myriad Inverse, you're going to put the fight basically as you're dividing it and putting it in front of people. You're putting fights in front of people to let them show off their buttons. You're going to basically whether it is the opponents that they're fighting or places that they're fighting and constraints that they have when they're fighting it. Basically, because sometimes that's what could make a combat interesting. Isn't just, hey, basically I put these things on two ends in an empty field. There are civilians involved. There are resources you need to try to get to before other stuff. There are basically things can get exploded, things like that. Basically operate under these conditions. I'm going to constrain you because I want you to change what buttons you're pushing. Basically to have you experiment, have you try different things, give other players opportunities to shine in a circumstance that they might not be able to normally. And
even within what I've written so far, like there's maps where your giant artillery robot can stand at the back and show off by blowing everything up. And there are maps where the giant artillery robot can't trace, it's a dense urban environment, and the giant artillery bot can't trace line of sight to anything. So they're kind of very limited in where they can move and what they can shoot, and everyone's going to be claiming cover against them anyway. Unless, of course, you do like the Lancer thing. Lancer bullshit, where it's like, yeah, I can shoot around three corners, and I don't care about cover anymore. Got a smart gun, got an auto hit, like seeking bullets machine gun. Like, okay, fine. But that's the way the game works. It's like as the GM, you put on these situations, and then the players do have to adapt to them to an extent. But also the players are going to break out things like you never saw coming. Like, yeah, when I was playing it last year, the GM set up a fight with I can't remember what the proper name of the class is, but an NPC who buffs all the NPCs nearby. So I took my grapple robot, grappled the NPC, and then dragged her off to the other side of the map. And it's like, well, solve that one. And it's like, yeah, that's Lancer. You just do stuff like that. Like, a decent part of GMing Lancer is like, at least part of it is like theatrics. It's like, oh no, my poor NPCs, you ruined them again. But Lancer characters are very powerful. Like, they're expected to go through several fights before they rest. So, you're not supposed to give them a really close match every time, or they'll be running on nothing by the end.
Yeah, and basically, that's kind of the nicety of having pre-generated adventures. Basically, like what you're offering at Myriad Inverse is it gives you as a GM the framework to start with. But basically, the joy of tabletop role-playing games is, as I've often said, no one's going to kick in your door, and basically, unless they're WotC, and basically drag you out in the street and say, no, you didn't follow the rules exactly as written, you didn't follow the scenario exactly as prepared. It is, you're handing it to them being like, here's a framework which is going to take care of some of your prep work, you're going to take it, you're going to run the first combat, you're going to watch X and Y happen, and then you're going to adjust that going down further down the road. But some of the work has been done for you. Basically, some of the balancing stuff, some of that stuff has been done for you.
There's a lesser known theorist called Mids Meinberg who writes about RPG theory, and they write about the what they call the Spielergeist, I think, which is this idea that when a designer designs a game, the designer isn't sitting at the table with you, but a ghost of them is present in the game, and the way the rules sort of like affect player behavior. And so that's kind of your position at the table as the designer, is that you're sort of there in the spirit.
Yeah,
which I think is an interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it gives you something to deal with, and that's what makes being a GM. Basically, the reason why being a GM it is an art, not a technical skill. There is some technical skill. There is some memorizing stuff, getting the rules down, making sure you roll stuff and getting things in. But it's very much this artistic balancing act of this works, this doesn't work, this advances the story, this doesn't. Let me figure that out, and let me figure out what the designer was wanting to happen in this situation. Oh, okay, they're wanting this fight to be challenging. They're wanting this fight to be pushing the players to a breaking point, whether morally or basically combat wise or something like that. Okay, let me tweak these things. Let me put these things in there so I can see what's coming next, because I've read the entire thing. I can see what's coming next, and I'm going to give these options to the players. I'm going to push them to failure when failure is interesting. I'm going to basically enjoy their successes when the dice say, basically, nope, this is what's going on. You're going to enjoy that. You're going to enjoy the laughter at the table. You're not going to be like, oh no, you beat my monsters, now I have to go home because I haven't had fun. It's you're enjoying that success, and basically you keep it going. And it's really interesting, basically as a designer, to set that up and be like, okay, I have an interesting, cool idea, basically, and getting that spirit across in what you're writing, so that basically players can get that understanding as they go through it, because that will make the entire thing feel like a connected thing. You're not selling 5 adventures, basically 5 combats you could do. It's here's the spirit going across all of them.
Yeah, I think it's the closest thing to a manifesto I have is basically it's the designer's job to minimize the cracks where the game meets the storyline. It's the GM's job to paper over those cracks where they come up, because they will, and it's the player's job not to insert crowbars into those cracks and pull. Like, just don't do that. Knock it off. But I think the other thing, just going back to what you're saying about GMing, is it always strikes you as a bit like being a wrestling heel. Your job is not to win. Your job is to be a plausible threat to wind everyone up, and then to go down at the end to thunderous applause. That's if you're a GM and you're playing to win, like, you're probably, I want to say you're probably doing it wrong. And I think when I'm starting up fights for the Beacon game, like, I'm trying to win. I'm trying to build things that are difficult and challenging and will force players to like think about what they're doing. But I lose every time anyway.
Yeah, it's basically playing to win. It's such an interesting. It's much like in any storytelling things like that. You want the villain to be successful, and you want the villain to be competent, right up until the moment they're not. Right up until the players present you something plausible that you can take and feel like, yep, that's the thing. Basically, that's their heel. That's their Achilles heel. You have found it, and now you've tipped the scales. Now things are going to start sliding down, and basically whether it's a sharp descent or a sliding slope is basically, that's the artistic side of the GM basically nature of, okay, let's have this tumble a little bit. Let's have it pick up speed. and basically, and then mitigating the players have given you a great solution, and then their dice say no. What does that look like? How does that work out? Or your dice say no, and you're like, okay, the villain is just succeeding a lot. How do I give the players a chance to come back from this? How do I give them a comeback mechanic and things like that?
Yeah.
And it's
luck mitigation is like really important to me, just generally. I think it's because I'm typically not as lucky as my players. Like, this has been a problem for me since I started running games. When I first ran Dungeons and Dragons 3.0, I was rolling initiative with a d20 plus initiative, like you're supposed to. My players were still using d10s, like you would in AD&D, and they still beat me on initiative almost all the time. And it was just like, what do you do when your players are so much luckier than you? And the answer is play something else. But yeah, that's why I like Fate. Fate is a particular favorite of mine because the Fate point system is like built-in mitigation for when things go bad. Like, if things go really bad, you can like give out, players will start picking up on like, oh, I think I'm just going to deliberately fail here using this excuse, give me a fate point, and then they can spend those later on to kind of dig themselves out of the hole. I'm just thinking, was it my brief attempt at like playing Pendragon? I really wished I had some like mitigation stuff.
The Pendragon's a little bit stricter, even in newer editions. I don't think have a lot of.
Yeah, I can't remember what edition it was, but I remember like you're supposed to. This the first like big battle the knights take part in the Great Pendragon campaign, and they mowed through the enemy, and then they met some Saxon berserkers, and one of the Saxon berserkers just killed a knight in one go. Just instantly destroyed him, and is like, what do you do here? I think the idea is you're supposed to like play your kids or something, or you're like your brother or your nephew,
your brother, your squire, basically some other family member, somebody else continues your legacy.
Yeah, but it's just like I could have really done with like something to just stop that from happening. Yeah. But that's just my preferred way of playing stuff. I know people like there are people who like that kind of high lethality, death comes out of nowhere style of play. I am not one of them.
I prefer basically. I really do like games that basically give you that option to basically either mitigate it or at least balance it back and forth. Like basically if the scales start tipping too much one way, they're good. Basically, there's a mechanic in place which is going to force it back. The 2d20 systems by Modifius tend to have basically a balancing A-B scale, like basically momentum and threat. I think is one of the more common ones, basically from their system, where it's the players need it. Basically, the players need it. They have a pool of momentum, which is letting them manipulate dice. But as they're spending it, it's going to the GM as threat. And then basically the GM is now getting the tools to fix their dice rolls if they're just being clobbered, and then they can start spending it and pushing it back and giving it back to the players to be like, okay, I'm starting to push on you. Here you have your normal tools, and here's your how you can kind of mitigate this if you just can't get out of this situation. Because that's good.
I say like I'm thinking of Panic at the Dojo by Velmini, where as you take out characters on one side or the other, whether it's the players or the enemies, the remaining characters just get stronger. Like they're just capable of more as there are fewer of them. Which is such a neat like balancing system.
In terms, I guess how do you you've obviously created a bunch of games. Basically, how do you usually do? You have a favorite comeback catch up, luck mitigation mechanic you tend to use, or does it tend to be based on what type of game you've created that will kind of?
It depends entirely on what I'm making. Because for something like Pig Smoke, for example, like one of my common things I do is I basically take death off the table. Like characters don't die unless the player really wants them to. Like in Pig Smoke, you have the benefits of like the medical wing, who are experimental wizard surgeons. So if you get badly hurt, they'll patch you up and they can cure anything. But you don't come back the same as you went away. You get like a random mutation or something, or you owe someone a favor. There's a move about it. And I did that in Strike Force Omega as well. Like, the characters can't die until the climactic combat. They can go down, but they're all like super enhanced, like super space soldiers. So they'll just get back up again, or one of their mates can come over and pick them up. But they won't die until it is like appropriate for them to do so. I don't think I've written any games where characters just like die. I mean, I wrote Crucible, which is a solo game about like, it's based on like roguelike dungeon exploration. The idea being that you will play through multiple runs. So character death and that is just a thing. Sometimes you ain't gonna win. Back to the beginning, try again. Randomness mitigation. Yeah, a lot of it is just like once you take death off the table, like it becomes less important because you can fail and it's not the end. Looking over at my shelf of games over there. It is mostly just taking death off the table, huh? I should try something different one of these days.
basically, like failure being basically a lot of the time. What you basically, this is true in video game design because I've looked at that as well. A lot of times, basically, the key with allowing failure is to make it either less painful or quickly recoverable. Basically taking death off the table means that basically, yes, you have failed, but it doesn't mean you can't. You have to stop everything to get back to where you were. You have to you make a roll and then you're back in there and you're continuing. And so it's like, okay, it's okay that I have failed because it hasn't killed everything. It hasn't destroyed all my progress. I can get back in there relatively quickly, as opposed to, okay, now you have to run back. Basically, in a video game, you have to run back 3 miles to get back from the nearest checkpoint. Or in a role-playing game, I have to stop everything, recreate an entirely new character, come up with some reason why they're back in the situation, etc.
I'm okay with I'm okay with stories about failure, but to tell those, failure has to be something that the character can come back from, like you say. Like, it has to be recoverable, because if it isn't, like, that's a bit more miserable than the tone I prefer to pursue. Yeah, like I said, I'm just looking at my games and like, all I've actually done is just say characters can't die. There is something in Gravity, which you mentioned at the start, segue into this other game I made recently. The deal with that is characters technically cannot fail, but because beyond a certain point everything they're doing costs them a price, it means that if you are driven to succeed, you can succeed at a terrible cost. You can do that if you want, or you can tell the story of like how you aren't willing to pay that cost in the end. It depends on what sort of character you're playing at the time.
One of the things I found interesting about Gravity, basically, when I was reading through it, is we've been talking a lot about the balancing act as a GM versus the responsibility as a player. And in Gravity, you've kind of deliberately skewed that so that there ends up being kind of a GM, but it doesn't start that way. What was your goal with that distribution?
Essentially, I stole it from the game Lovecraft-esque by Josh Fox and Becky Anderson, with their permission. It's the same system I used in Bleak Spirit, because the way it works is you don't know what's going on at the start, and so to preserve that, nobody really knows what's going on, and you build it up as you go. And then by the time someone has to become the GM, they should have a pretty good idea of what they think is going on, and then that thing becomes the truth. I just like that as a system for GM-less games, where you want to keep what is actually happening unknown. I think it's a good system for mysteries, because it's a genuine unknown that becomes known over the course of the game. again, I know there are people who disagree. They prefer a mystery where there is a concrete thing to be discovered and somebody knows what it is and nobody else knows what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the appeal in that, but it's not how I build things. I just prefer this kind of like round robin system. I think it's very good.
Yeah, basically, the one thing I will basically kind of say, kind of sticking on that, basically, is basically as you start out, the one thing you have to be careful with when you're doing that, especially if you're passing responsibility around, is those safety tools, those making sure at the beginning that everyone is comfortable with everyone else taking a turn.
Yeah, it works best with groups that you're already familiar with, where you already know each other's like lines and limits and things.
Yeah, because basically in every game, basically like either a session 0 or just a brief discussion at the beginning of, hey, what are people comfortable with? What are people uncomfortable with? Let's establish those so that people, especially when you're telling like in Gravity, where you have a lot of towards the end, there's a lot of pressure building and things like that.
Yeah,
you can easily slip into something. You're like, oh yeah, this person's fine with basically things until it reaches a certain point of tension, and then it becomes too real. And
you do need a way of dealing with that. I think in Gravity, like, is one of the things I remember listing out when I wrote that. It was like the various playbooks can all kind of like push in certain directions that people might find uncomfortable. So I tried to make a list of those. And I haven't got a copy in front of me. I am confident I included a section on safety tools in there because
you did at the beginning. It talks about lines and veils.
Yeah.
X card.
I generally just include like my favorite ones, and then ultimately the best safety system is a group you know well and get on with and can talk to about this stuff with. I am not equipped to teach people how to do that. Like, I can't tell you how to make friends.
Be a GM. It's the way to make friends. Basically, eventually, you offer your services and people will show up.
I have used role-playing games as a scaffolding for my social skills for my entire life. But yeah, you're right. You do need to think about this sort of thing when you're running these games where there's an unknown that you're building as you go along.
Basically, we talked a little bit about Gravity. I guess I should give you an opportunity to talk about what Gravity is, basically, because it is a really interesting kind of unique, basically, system. It's basically, we talked about Lancer and D&D and things like this. And Gravity is definitely for when you want to tell a different type of story.
Yeah. Gravity is my Locked Tomb game, which might surprise some people. Are you familiar with Locked Tomb novels?
Yes.
Yeah, basically,
Harrow,
I was saying, like, Gideon, Harrow, and Nona. So you know how, like, I think I was saying, maybe. I was saying, like, was it near the start of this conversation? I was talking about how, like, there's the maps thing from Lancer. Like, I was thinking, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put maps in it to show people you should have maps in it. I read a lot of people's Locked Tomb games, and I thought, nah, this isn't what these are about. So I sort of sat down, I thought, why do I like these stories so much? And it's about well-written characters in this pressure cooker situation, bouncing off each other a lot. I thought, that's what I want from a game that would emulate the feeling I get reading these books. I'm not interested in, like, each of the houses as like a class with a separate power list and stuff like that. So I wrote Gravity as a basic sort of system. I thought, okay, we'll do this sort of like I still used every house as a class. I just filed the serial numbers off a bit. If you go back and read them with this in mind, you'll probably be able to identify which house is which class. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to create a game that would do that, that would push people into, like, would create this kind of ever-tightening situation where these people would just ping off each other, and you've got a bit of PvP in there, you've got an external threat that needs to be defeated or not, and who knows how it's going to play out. like that's what you're there to discover. But that's what inspired its creation. And then I sort of like as I worked on it, I realized you could use it for other structures. So I kind of got rid of the overt lock tomb stuff and I just got rid of the overt lock tomb stuff. But like I say, once you know that, you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, this is very obvious.
Yeah, basically, it is. Basically, it's a some of this. If you want to talk about some of the like different scenarios, I don't know what have you run. Basically, obviously, probably run a little bit decent at Gravity over time. What type of situations and stories have you told in Gravity?
Oh man, let me think back. There's play sets in the book, and 2 of those are ones that I've run. The others are ideas. But I facilitated the sort of Adventures in a Dungeon one. That was the very first playtest. And that told the story of... It was mostly about the... I've forgotten the name of my own classes now. It's the one with a pet or a kid. The
Caretaker?
That's the one, yeah. Her and her sort of pet little dragon that was encouraging her to like seek the treasure so it could like become stronger because it was made stronger by treasure. And the Fading, who was a vampire who had decided to give up on blood and so was dying over the process of the game, but could occasionally do like really wild like vampire supernatural strength things. And I think in the end it did come down to those 2, and the caretaker became the villain essentially, and attempted to betray everyone and take all the treasure for herself and for her dragon. And the Fading stopped her. The vampire stopped her, which was like he went pretty PvP at the end. And then the other one was the other playtest I ran was like the terrible people in New York, like terrible rich people from New York playset. I remember that ended with their like house in the country on fire. There was a serial killer in there somewhere, but they all turned on each other instantly. So, like, the serial killer just kind of stood there and watched as everything went to hell. I think we eventually got trapped in the burning house. And it left with just the sports guy, whose name I've forgotten. I call him Jared. I think I called him Jared in the playset. Just kind of watching this house, and all his family's dead. His house is burning down. And that's where we left that one.
Awesome. That's good. That is very much a knives out, but actual.
Yeah. Like I said, like they turned on each other instantly. Like that was pretty much PvP from the word go. I was playing the servant in that one, and I tried to kind of like keep this mystery angle going, like who killed the patriarch? And like I don't care. They're trying to get their hands on his money.
That time someone killed him.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how that one ended. House on fire.
That's great. That's good. The idea of the fact that there's the system of there's unknown, it builds to eventually it becomes concrete with one player kind of stepping in and being like, this is what's happening, basically, and then running, basically, and then the ending is just dealing with that situation. Whether that could be either, now we all hate each other, and basically now it's a PvP fight, or it's the threat is now in the room. We now have to deal with what is going on.
Yeah, because part of the design of Gravity was like an attempt to accommodate people who like you can try and play like in character to achieve your character goals. You can try to play as part of a team to like defeat the threat, or you can play like really like hard PvP against the other players. And part of the design of the game was an attempt to accommodate all of those into one system. So it doesn't whatever people bring to the game, it's going to spit out a story about these events. Like you can play to win, whether that's beating the threat or achieving your character's personal goals, and you will still be doing stuff that is thematically appropriate for your playbook and the story that you're telling. That's the objective, and I think it works reasonably well.
There's also that added bit of claustrophobia, as it were, with the move system. If I remember correctly, the move system is basically you get to use a move once,
Yeah,
and then it's gone. You've played
Yep.
that card. You've played basically
Yep.
you've played your hand. Basically,
Yeah.
now you have to deal with it. You can't get that back. Have you used it too soon? Well,
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you use one of your strong moves, it's still good to use it. You've still achieved something there. But once I originally hit on that idea because I've noticed in games people will tend to just spam their strongest stuff unless you put something in that makes it impossible. And I thought, well, let's just take away something after you've used it. Like, you have enough moves to last you the game and a little bit more. So, and then once I had that in place, it made making the moves a very interesting exercise because it means you can do stuff like you can make the stronger moves, say, harder to trigger by having them be more demanding. Or if you want to give, like, the Prodigy has a move, one of their strong moves is just like, you just solve a problem by smashing it. Like, and it lets you play into your ridiculous strength. It lets you solve a problem straight out the gate, and it's a strong move, so it does something about the threat as well. It's really good. You can only use it once though, so once it's gone, it's gone. And it let me give each of the playbooks like a different kind of flavor regarding like what their strong moves sort of look like and what their neutral moves look like. And because neutral moves you can trigger anytime, they're usually really easy to trigger, but they don't do a huge amount. And then the weak moves are also easy to trigger, but they make things worse. They will generally sort of create drama or strengthen the threat or otherwise mess things up. And so you can build in that kind of balancing structure by making it harder to do the powerful stuff just narratively, like more demanding. You have to set up more dominoes before it will go off.
Basically, it's also interesting for the standpoint of basically, especially when if you have a PvP aspect, it's the can I get you? Basically, you should deal with this problem. I don't want to spend. I want to keep my hand. I want to keep my things close to the chest.
I want to keep my strong moves for me. And like, well, if nobody does anything, that's a problem.
Yep.
But yeah, like if that's what happens, then what you end up telling is the story of a bunch of people who won't help each other, and as a result, everything goes to hell. Like with the burning house New York story.
Yep.
Whereas if people work together, they can tell a story about cooperation instead. Like there is an element of, there's always going to be an element of PvP to it, but it doesn't you don't have to lean into it. You can choose to cooperate, and it'll still work.
Yeah, it's a lot of basically what story have you decided to sit down and tell? What story did the others decide to come to this table and tell?
And and ideally, like, you don't need to coordinate that ahead of time. You can all kind of bring your own views to the table, and the game will transform that into something that is the sum of those.
Yeah, it's basically you have a lot of different options for what type of characters you want to play in there, because basically you're using, again, talk about Power of the Apocalypse. The great thing with that is the wide range of playbooks that you can kind of span out in front of people. They don't have to be like, well, I want to be basically, I don't know exactly what this is. What about this? You're like, okay, here are your options. Basically, basically it works great for basically these kind of games, which tend to work better as they're not long-term campaigns, they're one-shots, so it's the get people together, hand them stuff, explain the mechanics, and let the story go.
Yeah. 10 playbooks, and each one has like assorted kind of motivations and things you can pick up, and you can style them different ways. So it's like, yeah, it should have enough replayability value to keep you busy.
Well, basically, one thing I did want to talk about, basically, and kind of, you've done, basically, I don't know what your total is at currently of games you've produced, things like that, but what's that pipeline like for you? Because basically, currently, Myriad Inverse is currently in
Mhm.
basically is currently backing basically right now on Backerkit. You can find the link in the description of this video, or basically it's popped up in chat a couple of times as well. But what is that like in terms for basically being a designer? People are like, oh, I want to produce this thing and I want to do crowdfunding to do it. Like, okay,
Mhm.
how does that pipeline work? Is a really interesting thing because it's not like a traditional publishing situation.
It used to work a lot better than it does now. Let's be honest. Um, the production part. What I like to do is like I like to get my text finished first. I like to write the entire game or supplement whatever it is I've done. And then because then I know I've got something. It's not so and because the other thing is I do is I'll start writing something and I'll lose interest halfway through, and that's why I don't announce stuff in advance. Is because like I don't want to commit to finishing this thing when I know it's just going to be a huge slog. So I finish things first. Then I will usually try and put it into layout at least to start with, to get a sense of like what I want the thing to look like, what fonts I'm using, whether there are gaps in the text when I've moved stuff around. And then I'll have enough information to commission an artist to do some art for me. And sometimes I'll see an artist and I'll think, I want to use you for a project, you're great. And sometimes I'll have the project first and then like cast around looking for somebody whose vision matches it, which can produce some really interesting results. Because like when I did Crucible, I had an artist in mind, but she wasn't able to do it. She got a new job doing like concept art for something or other, so she wasn't able to fit me in the end. So I was sort of looking around, and this guy I follow on Blue Sky was posting, "My daughter is an artist looking for work." I was like, "Wonder if she's any good." So I looked at her stuff and I thought, "Yeah, this is great." So Isabel Benson got them to do it, and the way that Crucible looks now is so different to how I'd pictured it with the previous artist's work, which is much more like sort of kind of like Victorian naturalist sketching kind of style. So like a lot of the character of Crucible now is because I tripped over Isabel when I was looking for an artist at short notice. In fact, my work with Galen Peugeot has gone the same way. Like when I was doing Bleak Spirit, I commissioned an artist and she flaked on me. So I got another guy in and he flaked on me. So I got another person in and she flaked on me. And I'm like, I've set a launch date for the Kickstarter by this point because you know it's coming up and I'm like, I need a cover. I need some art to put on this thing somewhere. And Grant Howitt of Rook and Deckard recommended Galen Peugeot. So he did all the art for Bleak Spirit, and it's great. He's captured the vibe of it perfectly. And then we've worked together on a bunch of stuff since, including Thread Cutters, which is a proper collaboration. He came up with the setting and a lot of like the broader system stuff, like the structure of it, and he did all the art, which is why it's good. And I did the rules and the writing. And we worked on something else as well, but I've forgotten what it was. Looking at my games again to try and remember. No, I've forgotten. But yeah, like the question was about the pipeline. So yeah, I write everything first, then I put it into layout, then I go looking for an artist. At some point in here, I will usually put together a crowdfunding page. But typically what I'm quite bad at, you're supposed to like hype up crowdfunders months in advance. Months and months. You get people signed up. You want like hundreds or thousands of people on that pre-launch page to be notified immediately goes live. I do not have the patience for any of that. Like I will write a thing, I've got it, it's like I've written it, I've put it into a layout template, I've commissioned an artist to do a cover, maybe some interior art depending on the money. And it's like, well, I could now spend 6 months hyping people up for this thing that is almost finished already, or I could just, spend 3 weeks talking about it, push the button, there you go, buy my stuff. I would not advise people do things the way I do because it's not a path to success. Like if you talk to like the people at Backerkit are really good about like talking you through the process by which you need to succeed. This information is online all over the place as well, like what you need to do, what you need to do in advance, how you build up contact lists, do marketing, do email marketing, set up landing pages. And just talking about it, I just feel my soul leaving my body. I didn't get into game design because I want to sell things. I got into it because I like to design games, and selling it's just kind of like a sideline. But yeah, I like to have as much in place before I do the crowdfunder as possible. And then when it's done, I like to tie it off as quickly as possible. Because it's the one thing I have about projects is when I am done with it, I am done. Draw a line under it, move on. Crowdfunding makes it a little more difficult because you can't draw a line under it until everyone's got what they paid for. So it's just kind of hovering there, being a problem. Like, I haven't fulfilled Gravity yet. Nearly. I've sent everyone their PDF. I sent everyone their PDFs like the day the project closed. Then just print copies to go, which are being printed right now. Everything's set up to ship them. Just got to get the print copies and can get them shipped out. That's... But yeah, I would like it to be done now. I've got another project crowdfunding right now. Like, I don't want to be thinking about the previous one. But yeah, that's sort of vague. It's a vague ramble about how I turn games into physical objects. And again, I wouldn't recommend this path for other people. Like, do the marketing properly. It will be so much more successful. It's not enough to grab people by the lapels and go, the games are good, just buy them.
Please pay them. You have to find people where they are and
get told off at conventions. But yeah, I'm not good at marketing.
Yeah. It is gone are the days of where basically any crowd oh, you're crowdfunding. Yeah. Oh, wow, basically you're one of 5 people crowdfunding an RPG this month. It's now you're one of 1,562 projects which have launched today. What makes you different? What makes you interesting? And basically, and one of the ways you've chosen to do it in terms of basically, hey, having your stuff done, basically helps you deal with that a little bit more in terms of.
I find doing it on my own terms is quite helpful. I was going to say something, and I think the cat's sitting on my headphone cable.
The cat's still your third thought. It happens.
Yeah, it's like when I launched Pig Smoke, like, I was nobody. Like, I launched this game with no preamble, no nothing. I just posted a thing on Twitter, as was then. I was just like, launched a game, be nice if people backed it. And yeah, funded in like 2 days, maybe something like $8,000 overall, which, you know, is pretty decent for starters. But you can't do that anymore. It doesn't work.
Nope.
Like I tried that with Gravity, and I made like just more than $2,000, which is enough to fund it, but not by very much. Yeah, and in the modern world, you gotta hustle.
I see. Much like a lot of things, basically,
Well, you know, as the phrase goes, if at first you don't succeed, learn to love failure.
Yeah, and so it is always basically, it's always interesting just to seeing how much things have changed and how much things are basically in terms of they first.
The volume control. I can't hear anything you're saying.
The cat has disrupted the conversation. The cat is here. The cat is now attacking the camera. Do we have restored communication?
Yeah, okay. Yes, you turned my volume right down. So I don't know anything you said during that entire last bit.
That's fine.
Trolls beast.
The cat has decided that I have spoken too much. Basically, mostly all I was saying was just the fact that basically crowdfunding has basically proven like a lot of things too. Basically, the world is changing. Basically, what seems easy at first, basically quickly, like, oh, you basically just do X. Well, okay, you had to trust X and know to get into X early. And now that it's done, you have the advantage of the fact that you have a lot of people who have done it before you, people like you who have advice and things like that. And so if you're trying to get into it later, take advantage of that. Basically, learn from that, because if you try to just be like, oh, it's a mm-hmm. You're either getting in when no one has done it, and so you have the advantage of nobody has done it. There aren't that many people there, or you're coming in later and a lot of people have done it. But that just means the fact that now you have a lot of people you can pull on for resources and to look into and basically and learn. If you choose not to do that, you're going to run into troubles.
Yeah.
And so basically we're approaching time here, so basically we'll kind of move on. Is there any last thoughts on basically anything we didn't cover you want to bring up?
Just something I want to bring up on the back of the crowdfunding chat. It's something I like to encourage people to do is like you can go onto Kickstarter and you can sort projects like within like tabletop games by stuff that isn't funded yet. Because what the crowdfunding sites like to do is show you stuff that's already funded because they want huge runaway successes for a variety of reasons. But there's some really cool stuff just kind of lurking in the not funded yet bracket that is probably a better use of your money. So like, anyone watching this, listening to this, go to your crowdfunding site of choice, take a look at the stuff that isn't funded yet, find something interesting, because I guarantee you there is something in there that you look at it and go, it's worth throwing a tenner at this. Something with Xenotopia, in fact, if you load the Xenotopia page, scroll right down to the bottom, where it says, I'm just going to look it up so I can tell you exactly what it says. You scroll down to the bottom of the Xenotopia page, past all the streams and all like the trending stuff, it says on its way. And you click view all projects, and it will take you to a page which is sorted by projects that could do with a bit more money. It's like, that's where your cash is going to be really useful. To just push these things over the edge if possible, give them a bit more support. Like, the people who've already made $10,000 do not need another 10. Well, maybe they do. I don't know. Like, I'm not operating on that scale, I don't know. But I do like to encourage people to look at the stuff. You have to deliberately go looking for the stuff that is otherwise, like, invisible. But there is cool shit in there. Definitely. Like, go looking for it.
Yeah, kind of wrapping this all together, basically, like what we talked about at the beginning, in terms of the story you want, basically the game you are going to play, the story you tell, it's going to depend a lot of time what buttons you put in front of your players. And basically, sure, D&D is out there, basically Pathfinder is out there, Vampire is out there, and it has everyone's familiar with those and what buttons they have and things like that. But basically figuring out, I want to tell this type of story, and then finding the system that can help you tell that type of story, or finding a system that makes you go, I want to tell this story.
Yeah,
like listening, like Gravity, and you're like, I want to do a Knives Out story of Gravity.
Yeah.
Basically, you're going to find those in that not funded yet category. You're going to find those inspiration, those interesting stories, those slightly different things, the things that are just going to be interesting for your group. Because every group is going to be every group tells stories slightly differently. Every group is going to have different measures of what a success is, what a failure is, how they want those successes and failures to work. And you're going to find those systems out there, which are going to help you tell that story. And you need to go out and find them. You need to look for them, because you're going to tell a much more interesting story as a GM when you find that system that actually speaks to you, as opposed to you bludgeoning your head against D&D for the 16th time, trying to tell that story you've always had in the back of your head.
Yeah. The algorithms aren't going to show you these things. You have to go looking, which is a bit more work, but I think it's worth it.
And so, basically kind of one moral of this basically of this thing is just find the go out there, search for the stuff, find the stories that you want to tell, support the creators which are helping you tell those stories. And if you are a creator, get your ideas out there, because even if you're like, no one is going to be interested in my story, no one is going to be interested in my way of telling stories, that's basically one of the blessings of crowdfunding, is being able to get your thing out there and being like, oh, here's my way of telling stories, and finding other people who want to take that and run with it.
Yeah, everything you make has the potential to be somebody's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if it's something you don't even particularly like that much, like somebody is going to see this and go, yes, this speaks to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for coming on here, basically. Thank you for basically talking about all of that. Again, I will offer up. Is there anything else you want to say, talk about, discuss before we wrap up here?
Nope. I think Cedric is just about to roll onto the end stream button, so we should probably wrap up pretty quickly.
Before the cat disconnects us, we will quickly give our last spiels here. So, basically, if you want to give your last spiel, your last pitch for your stuff, and then I'll get the last pitch for our stuff.
Yeah, Myriad Inverse. It's crowdfunding now. It's a Lancer campaign. If you like Lancer campaigns, you'll like this one, probably. Failing that, go to my itch store. I have a pathological aversion to doing the same thing twice, so you will find a ridiculous variety of stuff on there. Like, no two games do the same thing. They're all good. They're good games. Buy them. You will enjoy them, I swear. Again, you can't do that at conventions.
They get touchy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty much what I've got, role-playing wise.
Basically, we've got those links in the chat. Check those things out. Follow them. Buy them. Basically, like, I'll probably be trying to basically pick up a copy of Gravity, because that one really sounds interesting. I'd love to run basically one of those tight little one-shot games. Would be great for a Halloween or something like that. So I always love picking up those things. So basically, of course, last one of these, basically we are doing all of this here on this channel. Basically, this is LoreLink. Basically, we are a table. Basically, we do these streams because basically what the overall mission of LoreLink is, which is we're wanting to enable GMs to tell their stories to their players with as little suffering on their part as possible. Whether that's introducing them to cool creators and things like that to help to get them cool systems, or providing the tool, basically LoreLink, the tool itself, to allow you to be able to tell your stories, record your stories, and get them out in a way that you're not having to stop and dig through your notes and do all of that things, and just clearing the way so you can tell the stories you want to tell with your players, basically easily, quickly, and have the most fun that you can. So of course, if you want to know more about LoreLink, you can check us out on our various social platforms. Obviously, here on Twitch, we are streaming every Tuesday, whether interviewing cool creators or like next week, putting game examples into LoreLink. I believe next week Mike will be back with running more of Dune, basically putting Dune Imperium, basically that's by Modifius, into LoreLink, and he'll be back next week with that. And basically later this month we'll probably have other cool systems and things which are coming. And the only way you'll find out when we're streaming is, of course, if you follow us here on Twitch. Basically, it'll give you a cool pop-up that'll say, hey, they're doing this now. So click that follow button and it will let you know. And of course, if you want to basically saying like, hey, I like what you're doing, I want to encourage you to keep doing it, that's what that subscribe button is there for. It never causes you to have to deal with basically, oh, we're only doing subscriber-only streams or anything like that. Always appreciated, never required. And of course, if you have one of the various Amazon, Twitch, Gaming, Prime, whatever they're calling it this week, you could use it to pickpocket Jeff Bezos and take $5 of his money and put it into our pockets, where we guarantee, unlike Jeff Bezos, not to spend it on a yacht. Except maybe like an in-game yacht. Maybe we'll buy a DLC or an expansion about yachts, but that's as close as we'll get. And of course, if you want to follow us on other platforms, these streams are archived on YouTube, so you can check them out there if you want to catch more of this. Basically, if you came partway in, or if you want to see some of our other cool interviews, they're over on YouTube. If you are interested in following just what we're talking about, basically interesting, cool links. Basically, we often highlight a lot of creators and cool backer kits and other crowdfunding stuff that we've found. You can follow us over on Blue Sky, and we are available there as well. And lastly, if you want to avoid all that, you just want something delivered to your inbox so you don't have to deal with the internet, I respect that 100%. We have a newsletter, so you can just subscribe to that and just basically just get delivered news to you. Also on that same Get Started page, you also find out how to use LoreLink and get started in basically creating your own campaigns. If something we've talked about has sparked an interest and you want to start throwing ideas down, grab a LoreLink account. Start writing. Do stuff. Write stories. Tell cool stuff. Have fun. Interact. Basically, the stories you want to tell are probably stories people want to hear and play. So, basically, until we are back later, thank you for watching, and we will catch you all later. Farewell.